One of my favorite things to do in a mix is to process drums and other instruments through guitar effects pedals. And it doesn't even matter if you don't have the same pedals for processing left and right. You can actually use mid-side processing to use two different pedals and get some very interesting results. That's what we're going to do today. Hope you enjoy it. And before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later. All right, so I'll show you what's going on in the project right now. I've just frozen a MIDI drum beat going through the default kit of Addictive Drums. And this is going to go through the ReaInsert plugin. So ReaInsert connects to your audio interface inputs and outputs in a loop. So on the hardware sends, I've got my outputs 3 and 4. And on my hardware returns, I've got line in 3 and 4. Depending on the type of audio interface you have, which inputs and outputs are available, you'll need to make some changes. Most of the time, you don't want to send out your main output, which is your normal speakers. There's also a send level control and a return level control. Ideally, you're adjusting your audio items or the effects chain before this plugin to adjust your send level, gain stage it correctly. And also on the output side, instead of adjusting the return volume here, you can adjust the preamp volume of those inputs coming in. So in this case, I have my Audio Fuse Control Center. This is the software mixer for my audio interface. Line in 3 and 4, I've got the gain at +9, but 10 dB of input gain there. I have these tracks muted. I'm not going to hear this direct monitoring because I want Reaper to delay compensate it so that it works with everything else in the project. And I do have my reamp function turned on. You don't necessarily need a reamp function. Most of the time you can just go line out to the pedals and line in. Technically it's not line level. You should have reamp boxes, but my device has reamp boxes. I'm just going to make sure that the pedals are bypassed, and I'm going to hit the ping detect function here. That sends a little signal out to the pedals and brings it back, compensates for any additional latency of the devices and the whole round trip latency thing. The reported latency was 885, and using the ping detect, it found that to be 7 samples different. And that's probably because of some variance with the buffer size. Right, so if I play this without ReaInsert, it sounds like this. And if I play it through ReaInsert, where I have 2 different pedals patched in, they're currently bypassed, but here's how it sounds. I don't think that's quite right. So assuming everything's wired correctly, you should see some input on both of those channels. And I'll turn them on. I have a Proco Rat on the left channel and the Tube Screamer on the right channel. So I'll play through the stereo signal into different pedals. So it's going to have a different tone on the left and right channels. Sometimes that's going to work, but most of the time that's probably not. And so another way of processing our signal is to split it into whatever is common and whatever is different between the left and right channels. So whatever is common would be the same as if you played it in mono. Anything that's the same in the left and right speaker, that's going to go down channel 1. And anything that's different between the left and right speaker, that's going to go out channel 2. And so we do that in Reaper using a mid-side processor. So if we go to the effects browser and search for mid-side, we're going to look for one of the stock plugins here, Mid-Side Encoder. We're going to add that to the track before ReaInsert. And we're going to take Mid-Side Decoder. We're going to add that to the track after ReaInsert. So that's going to encode it into sum and difference, what's the same and what's different, puts that out to 2 channels. ReaInsert's going to send whatever is the same on the left and whatever is different on the right. That goes out to the 2 different pedals. Then it's going to come back into the ReaInsert plugin through that analog chain, and it's going to use the mid-side decoder to remix that back into stereo. so that we're not hearing it kind of out of balance. So let's hear how that sounds with the mid-side encoder on and without ReaInsert. Kind of sounds weird. The kick and the snare are all on the left, and the cymbals are kind of on the right. Now let's hear that with the mid-side decoder. Now it's centered again with the kick and the snare, splitting the signal into the sum and difference and then recombining into stereo, essentially doing nothing here. And it's not until we start processing the left and right signals differently that we hear a difference. So now I have the pedals processing the mid and the sides differently. And still the kick and the snare are centered, and we've got different controls kind of for the cymbals or the stereo parts of it. Let's switch over to the other camera and I'll show you how this works. All right, so over here we've got the two pedals and we can adjust all of the settings. Let's just start them in the middle, kind of. And I'll just loop this and play around with it. All right, so they're both muted. I'm going to bring up just the mid channel. And I'll bring in the side channel. I think that sounds pretty great. Let's try it with a different pedal. So that was with the Rat pedal. I'm going to swap this out for the MXR Bass DI Plus. Input 3 on my interface is connected to output of the pedal. Power is connected, and then the send from the interface is to the input of the pedal. There we go. So I've got the clean section on for the mid channel. A bit noisy. I mean, that's kind of cool, isn't it? Let's turn on the distortion now. So that's just the side channel processed by the tube screamer, but it's actually bypassed. So it's dry, and I've got the mid channel muted. So it takes out most of the kick and the snare, but we can bring up this heavily EQ'd version of it. Or heavily distorted version of it. Or I can bring in a distorted version of the side channel. So that's just something that I like to do in the middle of a mix, especially if I'm stuck or if I actually have some extra time to do sort of sound design stuff. It can be really cool to use that as a layer or certain sections of a song, just to add some sort of different textured impact and things like that. It's a lot of fun. And also, if you have the band in the studio, they get involved and they can experiment with you, and they'll like that part a lot more. And now let's talk about our sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with thousands of classes on art, graphic design, productivity, music, and more. Skillshare is one of my favorite places to go to learn something new. And with new classes being added all the time, there's always something new to watch. Most recently, I've been watching this class from Mike Lowry, Procreate Drawing Party. I've got an iPad and I use Procreate occasionally, and this is just kind of a refresher, and this is a really fun way to learn Procreate through this class. Up next, I'm going to be watching this Anyone Can Animate Easy Animation for Social Media. I'm just going to save that to my class list right now. So even though most of my day is spent working in Reaper, I have other hobbies because I always like to learn new skills, constantly learning. Some of my favorite classes here: Make Creativity Your Career, 6 exercises to create a successful side project. Real Productivity, How to Build Habits That Last. Simple Productivity, How to Accomplish More with Less. These are really great classes. First 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. Thanks for checking out the sponsor, and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So that's it for this video. I hope you found this interesting or useful. Definitely, Mid-Side is not a beginner-friendly technique. It can be a little confusing, but once you start using it, you'll find uses for it everywhere, and it's really fun. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.